Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Pentagon report highlights China's military ties with Pakistan and cautious thaw with India. A Pentagon report submitted to the US Congress indicated China's dual-track strategy with India, decreasing tension along the line of actual control while also strengthening military cooperation with Pakistan. US President Donald Trump's administration says will slap tariffs on Chinese semiconductor imports over Beijing's unreasonable pursuit of chip industry dominance, but would delay the action until June 2027. Pharma giants Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk clock horns in India's obesity drug race. The global pharma giants are scrambling to cement their lead in India's booming obesity drug market before cheaper generic versions hit shelves in March next year. Ukrainian President Zelensky says a draft peace plan which frees fighting on current lines does not require Ukraine to formally renounce its NATO bid and could include demilitarized zones. He says elections would follow a deal. A leaders' meeting is needed on territory and a nuclear plant, and Kyiv awaits a Russian response. Two police officers are killed in an overnight explosion in Moscow after an explosive device is triggered as they approach a suspicious person. Investigators say the blast occurs near the site where a Russian general was killed earlier this week. Ukrainian drone attacks target Moscow overnight, with Russia saying air defenses shoot down several drones and no immediate damage reported in the capital. Debris from a downed drone sparked a fire at an industrial site in the Tula region, as Moscow says more than 170 Ukrainian drones are intercepted across Russia. The US State Department says it will deny visas to 5 people, including a former European Union commissioner, accusing them of pressuring American social media platforms to suppress certain viewpoints. The former European Union tech chief rejects the claims as a witch hunt after being linked by Washington to Europe's digital content rules. Venezuela tells the United Nations Security Council that the United States is waging an unofficial war to remove its government and pursue what it calls continental ambitions across Latin America. Caracas warns it is only the first target of a broader strategy after requesting the meeting over recent US actions. Alright, let's start with the top focus here at World Report. Now, a new US Pentagon report has flagged fragile ties between India and China while highlighting Beijing's expanding military cooperation with Pakistan. The assessment says recent disengagement along line of actual control and renewed dialogue have eased tension, but deep mistrust continues to limit the relationship. It notes China is likely seeking to stabilize ties with India to prevent closer US-India alignment, even as skepticism remains in New Delhi. The report points to high-level engagements following last year's Xi Modi meeting, covering border management and people-to-people exchanges. At the same time, concerns are raised over China's designation of several territorial disputes as core interests. Separately, the report underscores China's growing defense partnership with Pakistan, including aircraft, naval vessels, drones, and potential future logistics access, signaling a broader regional security strategy. And I'd like to welcome retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi, who's also a defense analyst and joins us from New Delhi. Thank you very much, General, for joining us here at NewsX World. Now, the US Pentagon report is only pointing out something that India has always known for a very long time. How do you react to the report that is now also published by Pentagon?
Well, Kriti, firstly, always a pleasure to be on the NewsX World. Well, you flagged two points in the Pentagon report. One is the easing of tension between India and China, and second is the China-Pakistan increased military cooperation. I'll first take on the India-China tension. Well, the India-China relation have been always very contentious, especially because there's a long historical border problem. But the relation, nosedived in May 2020 when Chinese undertook massive aggression. Almost three divisions they walked into the eastern Ladakh, and they intruded into the three places like the Pangong Lake, the other is Dapson Plateau, and also in the middle sector. The issue was that this was unprovoked, action by China, because before that, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping had met one-on-one meeting in Wuhan, and then that was in 2018, and again in 2019 at Mamallapuram. So it was envisaged that the relations were actually, looking up, and that tension was actually being elevated. But this aggression actually came as a huge setback for the India-China relations. And over the last about 5 years, there have been persistent talks between the military level and also between the political and the, diplomatic channels. So at the end of it, there was a, definite move by Chinese to mend the ties, because Prime Minister Modi met President Xi Jinping in Kazan in October 2024, and therefore there were contentious areas where the disengagement had not taken place. That disengagement has taken place, but there are new protocols now about the buffer zones and the new protocols of patrolling. But the point issue is, Kriti, that while tension have come down, but there is a very high degree of mistrust. While disengagement has taken place, but there's no de-escalation. Still, about 50 to 60,000 troops on each side are facing each other, and this is the fifth winter now. So the point at issue is, while effort have been made by Chinese, in fact, they were the one who provocative, as say, their aggressive situation actually was great setback to the ties. Some, I think, strategic calculation on part of President Xi Jinping, that in case the China mends relation with India, then it will also be able to wean away from America, because China is very skeptical about India-China close relations. So they always try to balance out, and this is one of the reasons why there was a thaw in the border areas. But I would only say, having served myself both as a defense attaché in China and commanded my troops on the India-China border, that while de-escalation has taken place, but there's, I would say disengagement has taken place, but there's no de-escalation, and mistrust prevails.
Right.
The ties still remain very contentious, and the border problem actually remains unresolved. So all I can say is that as far as India-China relations are concerned, well, they are being managed, but the major issues still remain unresolved. Now coming to the Pakistan-China relations, these are deep-rooted since about 1970. The Chinese have been actually a major supplier of weapon system to Pakistan, and today, Kriti, 80% of the Pakistan military inventory is of Chinese origin, and that includes J-10C fighter aircraft, which were also in action during Operation Sindoor. They have been actually, they carry the PL-15 missiles, which as per Pakistani is proved effective. But as per India's assessment, Chinese equipment did not fare well. And secondly, they also have the
Correct.
other aircraft JF-17, which is a joint manufacture. And Chinese have also promised Pakistan to give them fifth generation fighter, that is J-35. And beside that, Kriti, other equipment like Hangar submarines, one has been delivered, the four are still under manufacture, and they'll be delivered. So the Pakistan-China military relations are deep-rooted, and I have seen for myself that there's a very, give and take, or there's a very, deep understanding between the Chinese military, that is PLA, and the Pakistan army, beside the government to government. So therefore, their relations are deep-rooted, and they have they are very strong allies with each other, which I said also was witnessed during Operation Sindoor. And my last point is, these relations are now well beyond the military relations. Chinese have invested about $60 billion into the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So the relations for transcend military to military and also have the economic relations. And I would only say that Pakistan is a very strong ally of China, and they are also working on the new trilateral, that is Bangladesh, Pakistan, China trilateral, and Bangladesh is now developing very close ties with Pakistan. Incidentally, I fought 1971 war in Bangladesh and was part of the freedom war, freedom liberation war. But today the situation is quite different, and Pakistan, Bangladesh are actually strengthening their relations, and
Yeah.
the military ties are also looking up. Kriti.
Sure. I'd like to have asked more questions to you, but anyway, that was a very comprehensive answer. Do stay on with us, General. Still, we have some breaking news coming in. Viewers, a 6.1 magnitude earthquake has struck southeastern Taiwan, according to the island's Central Weather Administration. The quake hit at 5:47 p.m. local time, with its epicenter in Taitung County at a shallow depth of about 11.9 kilometers. Shaking was felt across parts of eastern and southern Taiwan, but authorities say there are no immediate reports of damage or injuries. Officials are continuing to monitor the situation and assess any potential impact. Taiwan lies along the Pacific Ring of Fire and regularly experiences seismic activity. In the latest, another 6.1 magnitude earthquake has struck. And now moving on, viewers, let's also consider some news from the United States in context to China. Now, tension between Washington and Beijing over semiconductor trade have resurfaced as the United States signaled new tariffs on Chinese chip imports while delaying their implementation. US officials have said China's chip policies are unfair and aimed at dominating the global semiconductor industry. However, the proposed tariffs will not take effect until June of 2027, with rates to be announced in advance. Beijing has strongly opposed the move, criticizing what it called the indiscriminate use of tariffs and unreasonable suppression of Chinese industries. Chinese officials warn that steps will be taken to protect national interests if the measures proceed. The action follows a year-long US investigation into Chinese exports of older technology chips launched under Section 301 of trade rules, underscoring ongoing economic frictions between the two powers. Let's listen in.
中方坚决反对美方滥施关税，无理打压中国产业。美方的做法扰乱全球产供链稳定，阻碍各国半导体产业的发展，损人害己。
All right, let's request General Dwivedi to join me back in the discussion here. General Dwivedi, now this concern by US is being raised once again, especially after it allowed the NVIDIA H200 chips for China to use. Of course, that was, as some said, a suicide for the United States, because China was going to exploit all the available technology from the sale of those chips. And now once again China, the US raising concerns over chips and Chinese monopoly over it, and further saying a delay on tariffs. What is the United States' real concern here?
Well, Kriti, between China and America, the trade war is on for quite some time, especially even during President Biden's time. The trade has been a very major issue because China enjoys a very huge trade balance in its favor, about almost to the tune of $350 billion. And secondly, China controls the major supply chains, and also it has weaponized the trade per se. And that has been not taken very kindly, not only by America but by the other countries as well. But whereas America and China are two competing powers today, and trade is a major issue. Therefore, one of the critical areas is the semiconductors, because China dominates this arena, and it is able to play the game and take maximum advantage. Like you are right that US had conducted a investigation by its U.S. State Representative under Section 301, and the probe, which concluded, brought out certain very pertinent facts. First and foremost, the Chinese are resorting to the aggressive, sweeping non-market practices in that they give heavy subsidies to their private players, even the wage suppression is done, and all these things ultimately end up in the domination of the semiconductor market. And this is one of the vulnerability of the Americans, and that's why they had to, even in fact President Trump, he allowed the Nvidia to ship the H200 chips with 25% tariffs, so that at least they gain something. But the point at issue is, as of now, there's no immediate solution. Of course, America is now going on, in wholehearted drive to ensure that they are able to reduce dependence on China and also have their own manufacturing facility, but that is going to take time. That's why till 2027 early, they said that they'll not be imposing any tariffs, because in case they do that, then America is going to suffer more than Chinese. At the same time, America also has developed good trade ties with Taiwan, and Taiwan is a very major manufacturer of the chips, and which is not to the liking of Chinese. In fact, Chinese only, I think yesterday, their spokesperson was alleging that Taiwan is playing into the hands of America. So the point I'm trying to make is that trade war is the ongoing war, and in that semiconductors.
All right, we have some audio issues there, viewers, but we thank retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi for his opinion and move on. Now, small groups of pro-democracy activists have held protests today outside the homes of senior Likud officials. They called for a state commission of inquiry into the events of October 7, 2023. Demonstrations took place outside Education Minister Yoav Kish's home, Knesset Speaker Amir Ohana, and Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar. Protesters carried signs demanding transparency and accountability, saying the truth must not be buried. These protests come after a parliamentary committee approved a bill to create a new commission of inquiry. Under the proposed law, members would be appointed by the Knesset rather than the Supreme Court precedent. The legislation is expected to face a preliminary vote in the Knesset today. Moreover, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has argued that a commission appointed by the judiciary would not have public trust. However, opinion polls indicate that a majority of Israelis support the establishment of a state commission of inquiry. And I now welcome Matti Zweig, who is a geopolitical commentator, to join us here from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Matti, for joining us, first of all. And secondly, I'd start by my first question. How do you think the bill is likely to pass in the parliament today? What kind of support is it expected to gather? All right, we have some audio issues with our guests there, but crucial moment in Likud today, as protesters have been carrying signs demanding transparency and accountability into the events of October 7, 2023. And there is a proposed law under which members should be appointed by the Knesset rather than the Supreme Court as far as the new commission of inquiry is concerned. The parliamentary committee approved a bill to create the new commission of inquiry, which triggered the protests there. This legislation is expected to face a preliminary vote today in the Knesset. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has argued that a commission appointed by the judiciary would not have public trust. However, this remark is Contrary to what opinion polls are indicating, that a majority of Israelis are in fact supporting the establishment of a state commission of inquiry. As of now, small groups of pro-democracy activists have held a protest outside the home of senior Likud officials, calling for a state commission of inquiry into the events of October 7. All right, unfortunately unable to establish that connection with our guests, and we move on. Syria's foreign and defense ministers have been received by Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, with talks focused on expanding military, political and economic cooperation. According to Syria's state news agency, strategic collaboration in defense industries and modernization of Syria's military capabilities were discussed. The meetings come as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held separate talks with Syrian counterpart Asad al-Shibani. Cooperation on reconstruction, infrastructure and investment was also reviewed. Earlier, President Ahmad al-Shara had assured Moscow that all past agreements would be honored, signaling continued Russian military presence in Syria after last year's leadership change. Let's listen in to what the Russian foreign minister has said.
Ключевое значение этого визита заключается в том, что Россия безоговорочно подтвердила приверженность суверенитету, территориальной целостности и независимости Сирийской Арабской Республики. Я знаю, что вчера у вас состоялся очень хороший разговор с президентом Путиным, в ходе которого обсуждались и двусторонние вопросы, ситуации в регионе и практические задачи по обеспечению.
Cambodia conflict. Tourism at Cambodia's Angkor Wat has been badly hit as the ongoing conflict between Thailand and Cambodia on the border continues to disrupt travel, with cancellations leaving the UNESCO-listed temple complex unusually quiet. Overland border crossings have been closed to tourists, forcing tour operators to suspend routes and leaving transport services idle in both Cambodia and Thailand. Businesses report widespread cancellations and a fall in bookings amid safety concerns, despite authorities stressing that Siem Reap remains secure. Tourism officials say recovery will depend on an end to the conflict, warning the prolonged crisis is hurting livelihoods across the region. Let's hear him.
ប្រាក់ចំណូលខ្ញុំគឺធ្លាក់ចុះខ្លាំងមែនទែនបាទថ្ងៃនេះដោយសារថាមានបញ្ហាព្រំដែនមកខ្ញុំគាត់អត់ពិចារណាគាត់មកគាត់ខ្លាចបាទគាត់ខ្លាចគាត់ថាមានបញ្ហាដល់គាត់ទៅគាត់អាចលុបចោលការមកកំសាន្តទៅរៀងរាល់ឆ្នាំខែនេះខ្ញុំទទួលការងារធ្វើជាង20ថ្ងៃបាទប្រាក់ចំណូលអាចជា7ទៅ800ដែរប៉ុន្តែឆ្នាំនេះក្នុងខែនេះខ្ញុំបានតែ5ថ្ងៃទេបាទ
แต่พอเจอเหตุการณ์แบบนี้เนี่ยทุกวันมีลูกค้ามาถามอยากจะไปเขมรคัมโบเดียซึ่งเขาเคยไปมาเมื่อรอบก่อนๆตอนนี้เราก็บอกได้แค่ว่าไปไม่ได้แล้วก็ไม่มีอะไรที่จะแนะนำเขาว่าคุณสามารถจะเดินทางไปได้อีกเมื่อไหร่เราไม่มีคำตอบ
And that's all we have time for. Do keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.